Hey everyone, echohack here, and we have a really great lineup of Nightmare Dungeons this season, in Season 3, Season of the Construct. We just got this information from Blizzard. It's posted on the Blizzard forums. I'll have a link for you down in the description below. But man, this is looking like maybe the best season for Nightmare Dungeons since the game started. Man, I just went through it here on the live stream over on Twitch. Make sure you're following over there, over on twitch.tv/echohack. And man, this is so good. Just look at how many S tier dungeons we have. Most of these are actually dungeons that we know are S tier from previous seasons. For example, Blind Burrows, Season 0 Goat, Goa Ruins in Season 2, Boulder's Cave, Ghoul Run Canals, Mariner's Refuge, Deserted Underpass. These are all returning S tier dungeons, but there's a few new contenders here. So Underroot, I don't think has ever been really part of the meta, as well as Howling Warren. These are dungeons that are just really straightforward. They have nice mob types. You can just kind of blast through them really, really fast. They have great XP, both for your sigil XP and or your glyph XP, and just for your character XP. So, man, and Rhymescar Caverns. One thing to note here is that Underroot and Rhymescar Caverns are both sort of locked behind a stronghold, so you will have to unlock those strongholds to get access to these S tier dungeons. But man, we're really lucky. You're going to be able to just kind of blast Nightmare Dungeons sort of endlessly throughout this season. Now, I do put Champion's Demise, me personally, I put Champion's Demise into A tier. If you're running with a group, Champion's Demise is probably the best dungeon in the game, with Blind Burrows shortly behind it. But since I play SSF, Champion's Demise gets downgraded a little bit to A tier. There's a little bit of backtracking in it if you're playing it solo. Mercy's Reach is very interesting as an A tier. Essentially, it has these 2 rooms in it that have just all of the elites packed into it. And for that reason, you can kind of just walk into that room and you can just blow up the whole room and just get a ton of XP from that. So you don't have to spend a lot of time sort of like stopping and grouping up enemies and then killing a pack and then going in the next group of enemies. It's really, really good for that. And then you can kind of just blitz to the end of the dungeon. Alderwood, I know a lot of people like to put Alderwood in S tier. In fact, this is a really excellent dungeon. I do think that the wildlife mobs do kind of downrank it a little bit for me. I've always thought that this is sort of like S minus A plus tier, but it's still very good. And even the B tier dungeons that we have here, I like a lot of these B tier dungeons. Deadman's Dredge, if you guys remember in the beta when we could only play Fractured Peaks, this was probably the best dungeon in the beta at all. And it only hits B tier here because Free the Prisoners is a bit of a slow objective. Aside from that, killing the Animus Carriers and just kind of blitzing through this dungeon is really fast. Core Dragon, the first part of the dungeon is very slow. The second part of the dungeon is very dense and very good. So there's a little bit wrong with the dungeon, but the second part has some great XP. Akon's Grasp, very similar, has a lot of XP in one side of the dungeon, and then on the other side of the dungeon has some backtracking. So, right, like the B tier in generally there's something really to be liked about the dungeon, but then there's also some kind of problem with it. Shivta is very similar in that if you don't really know where to go or you get unlucky with Shivta, it can be very, very long. If you do know where to go or you're lucky, Shivta can actually be very, very short. So it's a little bit of give and take there. And Carnal House as well. I do really like the cannibals in Carnal House, but I think the Free the Prisoners objective is just a little bit too slow a lot of the time. Going down into C tier, we've got Commodore Temple. I'm actually a big fan of Commodore Temple. I originally had this in B tier, but it can have some backtracking and it is a little bit large. So just for the movement speed purposes, I do throw it down into C tier. Collapsed Vault is it's slow. Now we're getting into some of the slow dungeons here. Same thing with Prison of Chaldeum and Light's Refuge. These can be very slow and windy dungeons. Moggen's Works is actually quite fast, so if you're just trying to get your Glyph XP up, maybe include Moggen's in your rotation, but the mob XP is quite bad. So it also has a free the prisoners at the beginning, and that can make it a little bit slower. Yashari Sanctum, this is a new one as far as I'm aware, and I ran it a few times. I found that this was... I find that this one was not that great. Same thing with Path of the Blind. Now we're getting into these ones. These are probably your instant salvage kind of sigils, if you see these. Bastion of Faith and Serpent Slayer and Tomb of the Saints and Wretched Delve and Betrayer's Row. These are all D tier for me. In particular, Serpent Slayer, a lot of people go, well, Serpent Slayer is really short. Not really. So there's this problem with Animus Carriers. It's a bug, I think, in the game, where the spider mobs that explode, I'm forgetting the name of them right now, but they explode, and if they're Animus Carriers, then they don't drop their Animus for like an extra 10 seconds or something like that. And Serpent Slayer is guaranteed to have those as Animus Carriers. It also has the serpents that stun you, which are really, really annoying to deal with. And it has a really annoying boss. So Serpent Slayer is just not my cup of tea. I throw in D tier. Tomb of the Saints is really awful. I believe that there's ghosts in here on both sides of the dungeon, if I remember correctly. And you got to pull two levers, and then the second part of the dungeon's a slog as well. I can't even remember some of these, but I literally just ran these and rated them into D tier. So yeah, these are quite bad. I think going into Season 3, I'm just going to be salvaging these. And then my only F tier for Season 3 is Faceless Shrine. Faceless Shrine is so bad that it deserves its own tier, in that it's got... So, first of all, it's got to free the prisoners at the very start of the dungeon, which is very slow. And it's slow in particular, even though I really like cannibals as a mob type. When you have cannibals plus free the prisoners, the cannibals, they like to jump. They like to like YOLO off screen while you're freeing a prisoner, and then make you kill that guy, which then of course aggro's the next one. And then you're sitting there just like clicking this prisoner like 3-4 times before you get to the next one. Of course, you have to free 6 of those prisoners, so you get to do that dance like 20 times every time you're on this dungeon. It's really annoying, particularly if you're not like blowing up the screen and, you know, completely min-maxed yet. And then once you get past that, then the second part of the dungeon, you have to blow up 3 statues. But the statues are kind of in these alcoves, and the alcoves are really easy to miss. And they're also really difficult to route correctly. So it's very, very, very easy to miss one of them, do the other 2, and then you have to backtrack through the entire second part of the dungeon, do the other one, and then you have to re-backtrack all the way back to the boss. So that's awful. And then the boss is Mother's Lament, I believe that's the name of the boss. It's my least favorite regular dungeon boss in the game. I believe the damage on this boss is like overtuned. So yeah, Faceless Shrine gets an F for me. It's super bad. But overall, I think Nightmare Dungeons this season might be a great way to level. Now we also have great leveling from Helltides. Helltides are going to be up all the time, and the new season mechanic is going to be on the screen or on the overworld, right? So I think it's a toss-up between what the sort of like best leveling is, assuming dopamine tunnels, like people don't just stick in dopamine tunnels all the way to level 100. I think it's a bit of a toss-up what the best leveling is if you're not going to be doing dopamine tunnels, whether you're going to be doing Helltide plus some of the overworld events, or if you're going to actually be running Nightmare Dungeons and sort of pushing Nightmare Dungeon keys higher and higher and higher. Because, man, some of these are really, really goated. I mean, especially running... imagine just like running an Uldur's Key, and then from the Uldur's Key, you get 2 Gul'ran Canal keys, and then from that, you get Blind Burrows. Like, God, this is going to be wildly good this season. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you guys have a great season 3 start. This is going to be just insane. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.